What made you quit a job on the spot? Before we start with the first story, please hit the subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Number 20. Worked at a restaurant as a server. We just catered a large wedding reception. The owner's wife was chatting with the wedding party all night and occasionally getting the drinks. At the end of the night, she said she's taking her share of the tips since she helped so much. I say fine, even though that's illegal in our state. An hour and a half after the party ends, the restaurant is still a mess and the owner's wife was just standing around talking while I was supposed to clean up. It was almost midnight and I'd worked my other job earlier that day. I walked out without saying a word. They ended up giving me all of my tips on my last check. Number 19. Back in 1998, I was working for Dell selling computers over the phone. People were not quite ordering online yet. Anyway, it was so easy. I was making close to $100,000 a year because of how the commission structure was. Living in Austin as a 23-year-old. So one day my manager asked me to train a new team of salespeople because I was one of the top sellers on the floor every month. I turned this group into the most badass sales team. My crew of 8 were all in the top 20 every week and were kicking ass. After 2 months, I show up on a Monday, and none of the salespeople are there except my team and a bunch of other new faces I hadn't seen before. Turns out Dell didn't like paying commissions in health insurance, so they fired all the salespeople and replaced them with temp workers making $12 an hour. My entire team was the first group of temp workers. I was not aware of this. They were told they had to prove themselves and be converted to full-time with benefits. They were never going to do it. I told them they can all go f themselves and quit. I heard that week they cleaned house and everyone, even managers who told me what was happening, were gone and all replaced by temp hourly people. Number 18. I had a boss scream this is a dictatorship, and I'm the dictator in a meeting while slamming his fist on the desk. Seriously. That's sad. Like really pathetic. Damn. Number 17. I was getting married. I had a temp job and told them on my first day that I needed a weekend off in a couple of months for my wedding. I reminded them every couple of weeks, had it on the calendar, and even reminded them that Monday, that weekend came, and I was on the schedule. Told my boss that I needed it off for my wedding, and she said, "You're just a kid, can't you move it? We really need the parts." Admittedly, I was 21 marrying my 19-year-old girlfriend, but yeah. I laughed at her and left. We were scheduled Saturday and Sunday, 2 attendance points, and you're fired. So I assumed that I'd be job hunting on Monday after my wedding. I went to another temp agency on Monday and had a job lined up for Monday evening. On Tuesday, the temp job called and asked if I was coming back. I told that person, the temp agency lady, what they'd done to me. She was upset that they'd done that and tried to get me to go back, but I liked the new job and stayed there. Number 16. I had worked for a cleaning company, and I had a total disaster of a person named Tina as my manager for about 4 months. Tina would work the night shift with a crew and basically did nothing. She would leave the majority of the work for me to do during the day when it was a lot harder to do as I had my own list of duties, as well as whatever she left for me from her own list. I was teetering on the edge of quitting, but I hadn't found a replacement when one day I got a call from head office that Tina had quit, and for about a month the job was exceptionally better and I effectively was my own boss. Things were going remarkably smooth for again. About a month when I got a text message from Tina asking me to do a bunch of extra stuff. I called the owner and they told me that Tina had approached them about coming back and that they were rehiring her in her former position. And I literally just packed up and walked out about an hour into my shift. I had zero intention of working another minute for that woman, and held to it. Number 15. Not on the spot, but I was passed over for a promotion. for a role I'd been doing unofficially for 6 months. There was no official position for it when I started doing it. It was one of the manager's responsibilities, and they delegated it to me. Honestly, I was happy to do it, and I was frequently praised for how efficient and thorough I was doing it. So when an official position opened up to do it full-time, I seemed like the obvious choice. Bunch of my coworkers didn't even apply for it, because they told me they didn't think there was any point since I was obviously getting the job. They gave it to a guy who worked in a different department and had no experience using the complicated system required for that job. Then the manager asked me to train him in it. Except I wasn't really asked. I was told in a way that sounded like it was asking. We called it being voluntold. I refused. I said to the manager, if I'm not good enough to get the job, I'm not good enough to teach someone else how to do it. The manager then accused me of throwing a temper tantrum. I quit about a week later. Honestly, that wasn't the only reason. That was just the straw that broke the camel's back. Even the other managers couldn't believe he said that. Number 14. I worked at McDonald's when I was 16. We used to get a free McDouble or hot and spicy with a small fries and drink for our lunch break. One day when I went on break, the franchise owner was there, and when he noticed I asked for cheese on the hot and spicy, he attempted to make me pay for the whole meal because cheese wasn't free. I thought he was joking, so I laughed and started walking towards the break room until he yelled at me not to walk away from him in front of customers and my coworkers. I couldn't believe it. This grown-ass successful businessman was hounding at 16-year-olds for a slice of cheese. Told him I wasn't gonna pay, put the food down, and walked out. They tried calling me to come to work that weekend. I told them no thanks and never went back. Number 13. Walked into the interview, and everything went well, accepted the job offer. Went to the front desk to do the paperwork and noticed that the contract had a different pay amount and that I would be interning for the first month for $100/week. I asked first about the amount difference and was told, "Oh, this is the standard contract. It just hasn't been updated for your specific offer." I told them they'd need to edit and initial the changes before I would sign. Bull, that's not how things work here. I thanked them for their time and left without signing anything. They called me back on the day I was supposed to have started, asking where I was. I told them because didn't sign the contract. I was never an employee. Oh boy, that was a fun call. Number 12. Once as a teenager at a new job, I got my hand smacked by the owner the first day because I was writing with my left hand. Walked out. Where do all these head managers get off trying to rule over others like this? What the F is wrong with them? Number 11. I worked at Walmart for a short time. I worked as hard as I possibly could to unload their pallets of merchandise. I always thought I was so damn fast. I studied the process and I believed I perfected it. Every single day my manager came up to me and told me I needed to be faster. So I did, and the fast pace made me lose a little focus, causing me to break a finger. I let management know that I might be a little slower due to my injury, and they straight up told me, "We won't tolerate any laziness," and wrote me up when I didn't meet their ridiculous standards. So I went home after my shift and never returned. Never called, never formally quit. Just never came back. Number 10. Worked as a cashier in a local shop. One night 2 guys came at me with knives trying to get in the till. I just walked away and said have at it, as it wasn't worth the minimum wage to get into it with a couple of guys waving knives at me. After they ran out of the store, I picked up my mobile and called the police, then called the store manager. The next day, the district manager met me as I turned up for my shift the very next day. Her first words were it was very unprofessional of me to be on my phone while in work. I laughed at her and told her she could take this as my notice and walked out. I never had a problem with being held up, but the sheer gall of that got me. Number 9. I worked for an attorney. I was 7 months pregnant. I was supposed to be a secretary, but instead, I was constantly being sent out as a process server. In July, at the end of my 3 months, August, I was supposed to get a raise, and she said that she couldn't give me a raise. The day she said that I left at lunch and never went back. She was an awful person, and the guy I replaced told me that he felt sorry for me on my first day as he was leaving. I should have left that day. Number 8. I got mugged on a delivery for Domino's and came back to the shop crying and panicked, had my phone, wallet, and pizza taken, and told my manager what happened. Anon, are you hurt? No, but I lost my phone and wallet. I need to call the police. No time for that. Here's your next delivery. It was like 2 blocks from where I was just mugged. I just went home. The police never really did much to get my phone and wallet back. Not like they could. Number 7. My grandfather, who I considered like a father, passed away after a long stay in hospital. We were closer than he was with his own kids, and our bond was quite special. I spoke to my manager about getting the day of his funeral off, since I was organizing part of the arrangements and having a day or 2 of bereavement leave, and he agreed. The day of the funeral finally came, and the staff started calling me, leaving me messages asking why I was not at my shift, and telling me, while I was in a suit hosting family members at the funeral home, that I had to find someone to replace me or face repercussions. Needless to say, I told them to figure it out, and never looked back. Number 6. I got blamed for something that wasn't my fault, was in an argument with our VP or marketing, because I had the audacity to suggest a solution that would have avoided our problem, instead of accepting fault for something I didn't do. He told me he doesn't pay me to think. So, that was my last day. Number 5. Had a job about 10 years ago doing tech support for an ISP for a week. The pay was minimum wage plus bonuses you earned for selling people stuff. And by stuff, I mean terrible overpriced services that you can get online for free. I was still in the phase of training, where I had a supervisor listening in on my calls, and after a call, he told me I should have paused to try and sell him some antivirus service before I fixed his problem. Handed in my headset right there. Felt so skeevy when people call you for help, and you have to turn into a telemarketer. Number 4. I am a physician assistant, and took a job at an urgent care. After working there for about a month, I noticed some irregularities, such as some medications being expired, and sometimes a lack of supplies. I wrote that off as the office manager not being as astute as she should have been, and brought it up to the doctor who owned the place. He said he would talk to her and straighten it out. Then one of the medical assistants came to me and said, "You know this has been going on forever, right?" She then said that things would never change and to get used to it, because the expired medications had been on the shelf for months and they were told to never throw them out. She then also told me that the autoclave, the machine that sterilizes instruments, was broken, and all they did was wash the instruments in soap and water and put them in the autoclave anyway to get them as clean as possible. That was the end of that. I made out a formal complaint to the state medical board and never showed up again. The state actually came in the very next day and raided the place. They shut him down immediately. They found so many things wrong that not only did they keep the place out of business, they suspended his license. He was also prosecuted on federal charges because he was running a scam for truck driver physical exams. Number 3. Not me, but a middle-aged tradesman where I work. I work underground, and it isn't for everybody, terrible environment, and whatnot. This particular individual started working and after a few weeks decided that it wasn't for him. Bad conditions and hostile supervisor. He approached the boss at the morning meeting and told him that he wasn't going underground and that he was quitting. The boss told him that he had to give him 2 weeks' notice, and without missing a beat, the guy replied, "For the next 2 weeks you're gonna notice that I'm not here." Turned around, packed his stuff, and left. Was never heard from again. Number 2. I worked for the T-Mobile store. Authorized reseller. Not an actual dealer. 1 week, I had an amazing week, sold 55 phones, and brand new activations on a business account with 55 high-end phones at that time. When I got my next check, they said my paperwork was not in order, and thus they couldn't pay me. As a side note, they always told us to make copies of all paperwork in case this happened so we could show it to the manager and get it resolved within a day. I went over my backup paperwork with my boss. He said everything looked to be in order and he would have the office cut me a check. I went to the office and they told me it was still not in order. I immediately gave them my store key and quit on the spot. I did go through collections, and they did settle before I took them to court. The company did go out of business after a few years because they tried that with many other employees, which eventually led to an investigation by the government, according to an old coworker I bumped into years later. Number 1. Worked for a privately owned bakery for exactly 1 week. The owner's son comes in, walks past the counter, and into the bathroom. He comes out a few minutes later without acknowledging me or my coworker, gets into his car, and drives away. We both looked at each other, and then opened the door only to find this guy literally shit all over the toilet seat and the toilet paper holder. I called the owner and told her what happened, and she said to deal with it. So I asked my coworker if she wanted to clean it up, because I wasn't going to. She declined, and I told her I was walking out. She did as well. We locked up the store and told the owner we quit, but would reconsider staying if her son came back to clean up his own mess. She yelled and berated us for 20 seconds before I said goodbye and hung up. And that's all the 20 best stories. If you like more of this video, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also hear your similar experience or a fantastic story in the comment below. I'll see you in the next video.